Okay, we'll get a deeper understanding of what Sefer Shmuel is about. In our first shiur in this chapter, we noticed that the chapter opens up wondrously that God is angered at Am Yisrael, but we don't know why. And that was major question number one. And then we saw that David is spiritually led to make a decision to go ahead and count the Jewish people. And that also seems very wondrous. Why is Hashem interested in David going out and counting the nation? Then we saw that David gives this major project to his head military leader, Yoav, his nephew, Yoav ben Tzruya. And he's told to go across the entire country, from Dan in the north until Beersheba in the south, and count the nation, and I'll know the number of the nation. It seems that after Yoav opposes this idea, he's not interested. So we have a weird situation. Hashem is angered at Israel. We don't know why. The Tanakh doesn't tell us. Hashem influences the mind of David to count the nation. We're bewildered as well. We don't understand. Yoav, when we learned the Sefer Shmuel, we noticed several times that Yoav and David collide. And there are times that Yoav does what he wants to do and not what his uncle, King David, wants to be done. Here, in spite of his opposition to count the nation, he succumbs to the pressure of David, and he goes out with whatever party, whatever public, from the north to the south, and he does it in a very substantial way. We're even told how long it took him to do it: 9 months and 20 days. Okay, and this is before digital times, right? Is it? Okay. That means he crosses country, west to east, up north, going all the way down south, and he is counting the nation. When he comes back and Yoav delivers the census, how many are we? And he tells us, as far as the word soldiers are concerned, there are 800,000 soldiers in all the tribes of Israel, and another 500,000 in the tribe of Yehuda. Showing us that just the soldiers, maybe we assume that all the men are soldiers. That could be one understanding. So there seems to be the male population, according to the laws of counting, which are from the age of 20 and above, 1.3 million soldiers, which is an astronomical number in those days as well. We made a point to say that even today's standing army, even with reservists, does not reach the number of 1.3 million. When David becomes aware of the number of soldiers, we read in verse 10, we'll read it again right now, Vayach leiv David oto, in verse Yud, Pasuk Yud, Kaf Dalet. Yes. Vayach leiv David oto. David suffers from his heart is pounding. His heart is pounding. Not in the sense that he's in cardiac arrest, but rather he is so hit hard right now after the number that David says, Vayomer David al Hashem, Chatati me'od. I've made a great sin. Asher asiti. I made this sin. V'ata Hashem, and now Haver natavon avdecha. Please release the sin of your servant. Ki niskalta meod. Meaning I did something very foolish by counting the people. Why is his heart pounding now? Why does he feel guilt? Here too, things are not understood here. Now, if we pause here and look in chapter 21, what are we told in the book of Chronicles? In the book of Chronicles, the end of your Tanakh, okay? Chapter 21. We're told in verse 6, number 1, V'leviu Binyamin lo pakad betocham, ki nit'av devar hamelech et Yoav. Interesting. 2 tribes are not counted here. Okay? Is this statement told to us at the rest of our chapter? No, it's not. Okay? So it's not told to us in the book of Samuel, but it's told to us here, the true tribes. Why do you think these 2 particular tribes are not counted?
The levy's like separate from the rest.
Very good. So Yoav has an excuse. I'm not counting Levi because they always deserve to be counted separately. As we've seen in the past, in the book of Bamidbar, in the beginning chapters, they're counted separately. Why? Why should they be separate? It sounds discriminatory. Why is Levi separate to be counted?
They have a holier status.
Very good. The Rashi brings in the beginning of the book of Bamidbar, Ligiono Shemelech. They're the legion of the king. They're special, unique, with a special role, like you say. And therefore, Yoav found an excuse. All right, Yoav didn't want to do this. He found an excuse not to count Levi. What about Binyamin?
Could it be because he's the youngest?
Binyamin is the youngest, so what?
It's like he's the most innocent, like they don't want him to be participating in the wars.
Does anyone know why Binyamin is very small in number? Right, there was a civil war after the terrible incident of called Pilegesh Bagiva, when people of the Binyamin people took this lady and did terrible things to her, and then she was sent to all places as parts of her body, and there was a civil war. So Binyamin lost a great number of persons. Mr. Yoav wants to find a way not to count Binyamin. This explains why he didn't count these 2 tribes. He's hopeful that he can get away from counting these 2 because he doesn't agree to count these 2 tribes. So we're told here in the book of Chronicles in Divrei Yamim 21 that number 1, these 2 tribes are not counted. After the counting of the matter, what does it say in verse 7? Vayera be'inei Elokim. This entire matter is bad in the eyes of God. Ala davar hazeh vayach et Yisrael. And God smote Israel. How is Hashem smoting Israel? We're about to see right now. However, what's still unclear to us is, why is God mad at Israel? Why did God sway David to count the people? Why right now? What indication does David have that his heart is pounding him and he now admits to a sin? What sin? All these things are not clear. And therefore, Pasuk Yud Aleph, let's go back to Sefer Shmuel. Keep your finger on the place. Okay? Vayakom David baboker. The next morning he gets up. Udvar Hashem haya el Gad hanavi chozeh David lemor. After David admits to some sort of sin which is not clear to us, can the words of God come to a prophet called Gad? He's one of three contributing prophets to the Sefer, Shmuel, Natan, and Gad. And he's called the Choseh of David, the visioner of David. And he says now the following decree. What does he say? Verse 12 and 13. Haloch v'dibarte el David. Hashem says to God, go ahead and speak to David. Usually the word lidaber is tough language. Lidaber is devarim kashim. Speak the following sharp words to David. Ko amar Hashem, this is what God says. Shalosh anochi notel alecha. There are three impositions on you. According to one of the opinions, you, the nation, deserve three punishments. Number one, however, God is showing mercy. Bechar lecha achat mehem. Choose only one of the three. Ve'eselach, and then I'll do it to you. So here it is. God is offering a multiple choice to David to choose one of three punishments. What are they? Pasuk Yud Gimel, verse 13. Vayavo Gad el David. He comes, now tells the bad news. Vayagelo, and he tells him in verse 13. Vayomer lo, God tells David, Hatavo lecha? Are you interested that there comes upon you Sheva Shanim Ra'av be'artzecha? Are you interested in 7 years of famine? Wow, that's economic trouble, isn't it? 7 years of famine? Or would you like something else? Ve'im shlosha chodashim nuscha lefnei tzarecha. Or are you interested in 3 months of your enemies, your foes, running after you? V'urot fecha, and they're running after you for 3 months. Or, part 3, ve'im heyot shloshet yamim dever bi'artzecha. What is dever? Okay, some sort of plague that can kill human beings and animals. Ata now, da urei, go see, ma'ashiv sholchi davar. The prophet, God, he says, I got a message to you from God. 3 punishments. Choose one of them. And so that I can bring the answer back to Hashem, to what do you want to choose? What do you want to ask?
So basically the prophet, God says that
you deserve 3 according to one meaning. You deserve all 3. But Hashem is having mercy on you. That's one of the meanings.
Because the tshuva right afterwards? Or?
First of all, David immediately did tshuva. His heart was pounding on him. He felt something wrong. And our question is, what did you do wrong? You were persuaded by God. Something in the air that persuaded you to do this. So why are you responsible? That's still a question that we're holding. And now, I want to share with you the answer of David. We're still going to stay here in Shmuel. Tell me if you're aware of this pasuk somewhere. Verse 14. Vayomer David el Gad, Tsarli me'od. What are you smiling about?
No.
You're happy that he has tzarot? What are you so happy? Oh, you know the end story is happy ending. Tsarli me'od. Niplana, let us please fall. V'yad Hashem, to the hand of Hashem. Why? Ki rabim rachamav. His mercy, God's mercies are great. Uv'yad adam, but in the hand of man, al epolo. What does al mean? Do not fall. Now, the answer is, I want to be at the mercy of Hashem and not at the mercy of someone else. Let's review the 3 punishments. First punishment offered to him is what? 7 years of famine. Is that the hand of God or is that the hand of man? God. What about 3 months of your enemies in hot pursuit of you?
Human beings.
Sounds like human beings. Okay? And 3 days of a plague, of pestilence? Hashem?
Yeah.
So how many possibilities here? Choosing Hashem? Two. So why choose pestilence?
It's quicker. It's only 3 days.
Huh?
And like instead of having 7 years of troubles, it's only 3 days. Even though like one cannot estimate if the plague is worse than the famine. Maybe the famine would be kill less people. It says something 50,000 to die. But
I saw an answer regarding the 7 years of famine. I think it was the Malbim who brought it with the Radak. This will not affect the wealthy class. The wealthy class that has food or has a lot of money to buy, when the price goes up because of the small supply, it won't affect everyone. It won't affect everyone. And if David chooses, you know what? I also have money. Maybe I should choose the 7 years of famine. How will that appear in the eyes of society? Now we know why David chose this. Because it's not affecting the wealthy class. It's not affecting David. They have money to buy this. It will not have any influence on them whatsoever. So David feels and senses this is not the way to choose. Not the way to choose. And therefore he chooses 3 days, which, by the way, is the smallest in time. That some others say, if we're going to go through havoc and turmoil and pain and suffering, let's keep it as short as possible. That's what others also say. But it's also in the hand of man. Dever's totally in the hand of man. By the way, from a Tachanan point of view, so I hear that for this part of the Tachanan, we still don't go down on our face, and only in the second paragraph do we go down after this verse. Question is why? I'm not sure if I remember why. Nonetheless, look at the effects of this terrible dever. Vayiten Hashem dever b'Yisrael me'aboker v'ad eit moed. It happens exactly from that morning and until the end of 3 days. Vayamot mina'am midan v'ad Beersheva 70,000 ish. Catastrophe. 70,000 people. We can't even fathom this number. Vayishlach yado malach. Oh, now, after the 70,000 die, where is David when this is happening? David is in Yerushalayim, as you know, and he finds, or malach, he sees a malach, he sees an angel of God, and the hand of the malach in Yerushalayim is to destroy Yerushalayim. What does God do? Vayinachem Hashem el hara. God, as if changes his mind or is consoled or appeased. And what does Hashem say to the malach? Vayomer lamalach hamashchit. The same malach that it's destroying Ba'am, Rav. Rav here meaning, die. It's enough. Ata, now, heref yadecha. Release your hands. Okay? Rifayon. Let up. That's enough. Umalach Hashem haya, where was he at that moment? Im goren ha'aravna hayavusi. The goren, some of you know, is a flat floor, clean from dirt, and it's used for threshing the wheat, any grain. Okay? Any grain. And right now, he happens to be in the Goren of who's this guy, this Jebusite. Now, his name is mentioned in almost every pasuk going on, again in Yudchet, again in verse 20, again in 21, 22. His name is brought almost all the time here. Why mention his name? I may not have an answer, but you should know the famous Gemara Masechet Avodah Zarah, Aravna It's pronounced Arvona, Aravna. There's several ways of pronouncing his name. You should all know that he's one of the most important VIPs from the Jebusites. The Yevusim, as you know, is one of the Canaanite nations. What's special about him? He was like a governor in this area. But more important, he was like a Ger Toshav. Namely, right, to show importance like of a governor. He gave up in his idolatry ways, and he already believes in one God. He keeps the 7 Noachite laws, and he has what we call a Ger Toshav status of a foreigner, but he's given the rights of a settler because he keeps the laws of the 7 Noachite laws. Now, when you continue reading the story, okay, Pasuk Yud Zayin, let's keep on reading. Apparently, he was ready to be destroying more and more, but Hashem says stop. And then David makes another vidoy before Hashem in verse 17. Vayomer David al Hashem, Berotot HaMalach. When he's seeing the Malach HaMakeh Ba'am, David says, Vayomer Hinei Anochi Chatati. I did a sin. Vanochi Aveiti. And I even did a sin in which maybe I should be responsible for. Ve'ela tzon, and he points to the sheep. Which sheep is he talking about? The sheep is a metaphor for the Jewish people. He says, what's going on here? Me'asu, what did they do? I'm the one that sinned. Tehina yadcha bi, let your hand be at me, ubeveit avi, and my father's house. Gentlemen, tremendous surrendering of himself. Tremendous humility of a leader that says, why should the nation be hit more and more and more? I'm the one that should be hit. I'm the one that sinned. In other words, we see here the attribute that he cares so much for his own people, and he's sending himself that he should be punished and not the people. In other words, we call that Mesirut Nefesh. He's really devoted so much to God, and he wants to save his own people. He says, why should they get in trouble? On that day, when this back and forth is happening in verse 18, Vayavo Gad el David bayomahu, God appears on the scene, a shaliach of the prophet, Vayomer lo, and he tells David, Ale, get up. Hakem LaHashem Mizbeach, establish an altar for the sake of God. Where? Begoren Aravna Hayevusi. David is not told why there, but we have a problem here. The threshing floor is under the title, the ownership of Ravana the Jebusite. However, here receives a divine command. Vayal David, verse 19, Kidvar Gad. He goes up. Why is he what does it say going up? Because apparently this threshing floor is atop of a mountain. Are you going to spill the beans? Which mountain we're talking about? Which one? Moriah. Moriah. We're going to see that in a moment. Pasuk 20. Vayashkef Aravna. Aravna is looking. Vayaret HaMelech v'et avadav ovrim alav. He sees the king approaching with his entire group of people that go for him. Vayitze Aravna, look at this. He goes out to initiate the meeting. Vayishtachu lamelech hapav aretz, and he falls on his face, and he look at his Yair he's giving to King David. He wants to know, what are you doing here? Pasuk of Aleph, Vayomer Aravna Madua Ba'aduni HaMelech Elavdo. What are you doing here? David answers, Vayomer David Liknot Me'imcha et HaGoren. I want to build the Goren. I want to buy the threshing floor. Livnot Mizbeach L'Hashem, to build an altar. V'te'atzar Amagefa Me'al Ha'am. Apparently David understands, as will happen in a moment, that the end of the plague is yet to arrive, and it'll arrive if he performs the will of Hashem through the prophet. Aleph, to purchase the place. Bet, to build the Mizbeach. And I assume what's not even mentioned, to bring korbanot on it, as we're going to see now in the next psukim. Now, if we stop and ask ourselves, what's going on here? Because when we read the end of the chapter, indeed, the buying of this threshing floor, which David finds out later is Mount Moriah. Number 2, the building of a Mizbech, the bringing of offerings, stops the plague. What's happening here? This brings us to a subtle understanding of the following that I want to share with you. There's a great Ramban, Nachmanides, in the book of Bamidbar, on Parshat Korach, in chapter 16. And there, the Ramban brings, regarding the plague that plagued Korach's household, he brings this plague that's plaguing the Jewish people, 70,000 people dying. Why do these plagues happen? In regards to King David, he says, out of logical reasoning, even though it doesn't say that here whatsoever, there's no midrash that says this, to his understanding. Nachmanides says, hundreds of years the Jewish people are in the land of Israel. Hundreds of years already. We're 400 years. No one is going forward, initiating to buy the area of the Beit HaMikdash, to build a Beit HaMikdash and bring offerings. No one's doing it. That is a letdown. That is the negativity about this generation. Doesn't it say in the Chumash, quote, L'shichno tidreshu, you should seek out to have his shechina, and then do it and come there. In other words, according to the Ramban, the Jewish people, led by David, have been lax, not taking on ideals, not taking major matters, and if they would be doing it, that this great plague would not have happened. But furthermore, the question is yet to be answered. What is God angry at? What does this have to do with the counting of Israel? So really, a lot of vague matters here, a lot of clouds covering this parsha that we mentioned. We want to say the following, based on the Ramban, and also based upon one of my Rabbis, Rav Eli Mali, the Rosh Hashiva in Yafo. The counting of the nation, we want to say, is only really a symptom, an external symptom of something that's going on inside. And that's arousing the anger of Hashem. Okay? Let's understand what's happening now to the nation. We're led by David HaMelech. The nation economically, militarily, socially has reached new heights. The land has been expanded to all greater Eretz Yisrael. What God promised Avraham Avinu. Okay, until the Prat, until the Euphrates. In other words, through the process of David's time, the nation is now militarily, economically strong, wealthy. Every man under his fig tree, every man under his geffen, his vine. Okay? However, this entire period of military power, economic power, territorial expansion, conquering nations, and having them surrender to David, okay? In other words, the national side of the Jewish people has gotten to new heights. Okay? Rav Kook writes in his famous article called Zaronim, there are two ideals to the Jewish people. Ha'idea ha'le'umit va'idea ha'elokit. There's the national ideal of the Jewish people, which of course is the concern of a nation, collecting together, ruling over itself, distributing assets, cutting the cake and the pie and allocating it. And there's another ideal called the spiritual ideal. What happens if the Jewish people develop the national ideal without developing the Torah ideal? What happens if people here on a national level, militarily, economically, have reached great heights, maybe the first time as a nation ever at these heights, yet the visions, the ideologies, the ideals, the spiritual ideologies and ideals of the Jewish people are quiet. No one's knocking on the door. No one is leading to go further. It seems that we are complacent. We are satisfied with what we have, and no one is trying to knock on the door. This, some of our great scholars write, is the great fear of happening right now. Okay? The great national level of the Jewish people right now has inside it a lot of dangers. Okay? It reminds us, we mentioned it briefly last time, what happened to the Jewish people after the 6-Day War here in the state of Israel. Everyone thought, no one will touch us. We were in a state of, we were dreaming. Not spiritual dreaming. We were really overconfident. We were not going forward with spiritual visions and spiritual ideologies. Okay? When you settle for where you are nationally, and you don't go ahead to bring spiritual and Torah values into your great national heights, then you're a nation living without a vision. That could perhaps be what's happening here. There's one great element of the Jewish people that was not touched upon: the building of the Beit HaMikdash. No one is rallying. No one is searching. Everyone seems to be settled. Thank God we have David HaMelech as king. There's wealth. There's security. No one's touching us. Okay? Has the nation, Rav Eli Mali writes in his wonderful Sefer called Orot Mitzion, Lights from Zion, has the nation forgotten, okay, their great aspiration that there be a house of God on the top of the mountain, Mount Moriah? Okay? Remember, why did God create us? The famous sentence of Isaiah 43, Amzu, a nation that, Yatzarti li, I created for myself, Tihilati yisaperu, my praise they shall tell. Okay? We're not here just to build an empire, a strong empire. It's good to be strong, nationally, militarily. This could be what the meaning is of the Ramban explaining this chapter, that maybe God's anger on Israel is because we're not demanding, we're not asking for the building of a Beit HaMikdash. Okay? That's what David now feels right now. David now feels is, oh my gosh. Why does he feel it when the numbers are counted? Why does his heart pound upon himself when he gets the numbers? It's a very simple answer, I think. Wow, we're that big? We're that large? We're that great of an empire? So many soldiers? Wow. And where's our ideology? Why aren't we going forward? Why aren't we building a Beit HaMikdash? Now, you might say that.
He wanted to build a Beit HaMikdash.
And what happened?
Hashem said, no, you spilled too much blood.
Beautiful. Which prophet was used? Correct. Natan HaNavi. Natan the prophet. When David asked the prophet, can I build a Beit HaMikdash? He said, sure, do it. He didn't even bother asking God. And then he was disallowed. So David cannot, but maybe others in his generation can. Why doesn't David allow for initiative going forward? He doesn't have to do it, but others may want to do it. Maybe others are on a level that they can be the leaders, the initiators of a Beit HaMikdash. You don't have to say, well, because David is not allowed to, so no one else is not allowed to. So what we see here is the beginning of an answer. When David sees these great numbers and he realizes that he allowed for the growth of the nation, but the ideology, the vision of going forward and reaching the spiritual ideals, there's a lot to be left desired. And that David understands that it's his mistake. It's his even sin. And he says, why should others be killed? I should be the one that's being taken care of and not the others. We'll see the solution, B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow. God willing, we'll make a siyum. We'll meet 2:30 tomorrow.